He's been doing it for 3 weeks, every morning, standing in front of the mirror, his coffee going cold on the counter behind him. I am wealthy. Money flows to me easily. I am abundant. And every morning, right after he says it, he checks his bank account on his phone. Overdrawn. Again. The words say one thing. The number on the screen says another. And somewhere in the gap between the two, he's starting to feel worse than he did before he started. Like the failure isn't the money anymore. It's he. Like he's not even good at believing hard enough. Here's what's actually happening in his brain. Not the manifestation version. Not the cynical version. The psychological version. Because affirmations aren't magic. And they're not nonsense. They're a cognitive tool. And like most tools, most people are using them in a way that's quietly working against the thing they're trying to fix.
The cognitive dissonance problem. Here's the first thing worth knowing. When you repeat a statement that contradicts your current reality, I am wealthy when the account is empty. I am confident when you just spent the morning avoiding eye contact. Your brain doesn't update the old belief. It pushes back. Psychologists call this self-consistency. The human mind has a deep, built-in drive to keep its beliefs about itself consistent. When a new piece of information doesn't match, the brain doesn't rewrite the script. It rejects the information. Picture it this way. If someone told you the sky was green, you wouldn't update your understanding of reality. You'd dismiss the person. That's what your brain does with an affirmation that clashes too sharply with your self-concept. You say, I am wealthy. Your brain, which has decades of evidence that says you are not, simply does not believe you. And here's where it gets worse. That gap between the words you're saying and the reality you're living creates tension. And for a lot of people, that tension doesn't translate into motivation. It translates into shame. Why isn't this working for me? Everyone says this works. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. Maybe there's something wrong with me. The thing that was supposed to lift them up starts to feel like another thing they're failing at. What the science actually supports? But here's where it gets interesting. Because the research on affirmations isn't all bad. It's just that most people are lumping two completely different things under the same word. In late 2025, the American Psychological Association published a large-scale study on self-affirmation, and the findings were genuinely encouraging. Reduced stress responses, improved well-being, measurable boosts in self-esteem. The kind of study that gets cited in headlines with the word proven attached. But there's a catch, and it's the catch almost every manifestation video online misses completely. The affirmations that work in the research are not aspirational statements about things you want to become true. They're reflections on things that are already true about you. Your core values, your existing strengths, the parts of your identity that are stable and real. I am someone who values growth. I have gotten through hard things before. I am capable of learning. These are self-affirmations. They remind you of who you already are. And the research shows they work because they anchor you in something solid when you're facing uncertainty. The I am wealthy kind, that's aspirational affirmation. And the distinction matters more than most people realize. One type builds on what's real. The other type asks you to believe something your brain is actively fighting against.
What's actually happening in the brain? So if shouting, I am rich into a mirror doesn't rewrite your beliefs, is any of this actually doing something? Or is it just words? There is a mechanism. It's just quieter and more interesting than most people describe it. Deep in your brainstem, there's a structure called the reticular activating system. Think of it as a filter. Every second, your brain is bombarded with millions of bits of sensory information. Sounds, sights, sensations. You can't process all of it. So your RAS decides what gets through and what gets ignored. Here's what matters. Your RAS tunes itself to what you've told your brain is important. If you've been saying to yourself, quietly and consistently, I notice opportunities to earn, your brain doesn't magically create money, but it does start flagging things it would have filtered out before. A a conversation you overhear about a side project, a skill you realize you already have that people would pay for, a job listing your friend mentioned, but you didn't really clock at the time. The information was always there. Your brain just wasn't tuned to catch it. This is not the universe providing. It's your own neurology doing exactly what neurology does, filtering for relevance. And the difference between an affirmation that works and one that doesn't comes down to whether you're telling your brain to look for something real or to believe something that isn't true yet.
How to actually make affirmations work. So if the standard advice is mostly wrong, what actually works? There are 3 shifts worth making. Each one is small, but together they change what the affirmation is actually doing inside your head. First, use process language, not outcome language. I am wealthy is an outcome. Your brain has no evidence for it. But I am becoming someone who pays attention to money is a process. It's true right now. It describes motion, not arrival. And motion is something your brain can work with. Second, pair the affirmation with an implementation intention. This one comes directly from the research on habit formation. An affirmation alone is just intention. Add a specific trigger and action, and it becomes something your brain can execute. When I open my banking app, I will take one deep breath before I look at the number. When I feel the impulse to spend on something I don't need, I will wait 24 hours. The affirmation gives the direction. The implementation intention builds the path. Third, use bridge statements. I am wealthy is too far from where you are now. Your brain rejects the jump. But I am learning to make better decisions with money. That's close enough to believe. I am getting more comfortable looking at my finances. Close enough. I am starting to trust myself with money. Close enough. These aren't weaker versions of the affirmation. They're actually the only version your brain will accept. And a bridge that's walked across is infinitely more useful than a destination you never reach because the distance was too far to begin with.
None of this is as satisfying as just believe and it will come. That version is cleaner, faster, sells better. But the reason it fails so many people isn't because they're bad at believing. It's because they were handed a tool and never told how it actually works. Affirmations aren't magic. They're a cognitive intervention, a way of tuning the filter in your brain toward what you want to notice more of. And like any intervention, the effect depends entirely on how precisely it's aimed. The people who get this wrong aren't lazy or uncommitted. They're just aiming at outcomes their brain can't see yet and wondering why the target never gets hit. You don't have to believe you're already wealthy to start noticing wealth. You just have to start paying attention differently. And that starts with telling your brain something it can actually use, not something it has to fight.